So today I'll have a quick look at a little article I stumbled across, front-end dissatisfaction and backing off. And it's just this little rant somebody said about, like, I've reached my breaking point. I want to have a personal life and not spend my nights reading up on some new flavor of JS in fear that if I don't, I would soon be made irrelevant. Which is a extension of that 2016 article about what it feels like to learn web development these days. The old days of, I just pipe some jQuery in and I just start building some HTML. It's like, no, nowadays you have to do it in React, which requires a Webpack bundling, which will do some transforming of the ES6 and Babel, which will involve a whole NPM ecosystem and all these things that even the simplest Hello World now involves understanding 100 other things, which if you've followed the industry for 10 years or so, you've slowly incremented these changes. If you were learning fresh today, it would be quite daunting. But this blog basically says that there's this relentless change, this constant pace of needing to constantly keep up to speed with this kind of arms race of developments and new technologies, and it just makes you scared that you're constantly falling behind and you're having to keep giving up all your spare time to keep learning things because of they're not provided in your particular role, and you're having to keep pace all the time. You just reach a point of wanting to give up, and they've suggested moving into the back-end technologies which perhaps don't move as quickly. And then your comments, like, I so agree with this article. A few years back I left my job tired of building tools and new stuff coming out every year, which increase first complexity, productivity, and doesn't actually add sense. Okay. And then there's a bit of a ramble about Tailwind. Firstly, with people leaving jobs, I mean, usually you leave your job because of a general dissatisfaction, and I suppose with front end, if you've generally just lost an interest in developing projects and building websites and all those things, then obviously the technologies also won't interest you, and having to constantly learn about new ways of doing things won't interest you. I kind of feel like that's a bit of a chicken and egg, that you're frustrated by the constant pace of change because you're not interested in doing it. So you can't then blame the constant pace of change on the reason why you quit. You quit because you didn't like the thing in the first place. The idea that I don't like things, having to learn lots of new things, so I'm going to up sticks and move into a completely new industry or a completely new field and learn a whole new bunch of softwares and paradigms and ideas, to solve that problem somehow. I mean, why let CSS then? I feel like these people are afraid of using CSS. SAS should be your final stop. No more, no less. SAS is the end. Okay. I mean, I've done a few videos on things like CSS in JS, or using Tailwind or Post CSS, all these kind of alternate ways of doing things. I'd like to look at web components and other variations. It's worth knowing that none of those things are kind of agreed standards. All that happens is that part and parcel of JS being so successful and now living on the back end, and it also working in 3D technologies and virtual reality and TensorFlow and machine learning, because of JavaScript is becoming so ubiquitous, there's a lot of people looking at it and there's a lot of people thinking of new ideas. So while you'll also get to look at newsletters of people building amazing new code pens of beautiful visual illustrations and games and tools, people are also going to be looking at bundlers and libraries and ways of doing things differently. A million things get thrown out every time you get a new JavaScript newsletter that will show you a new bunch of tools or new plugins or new upgrades and features. There's still just people just spinning things out, and you don't necessarily need to cover those and learn every single thing that's on there, because you will burn out from doing so, but also you'll keep running down dark alleyways in which you'll keep learning things which ultimately don't get adopted by the industry, and you just keep learning things for the sake of it. Big things last year were Deno had this, I think it's version 1, so it's the new Node environment. People were really jumping on that for a while. If you found that there was an actual problem with Node that you couldn't get past or you couldn't deal with, and it offered some sort of solution, then maybe that's something. Rome keeps being talked about, which is a sort of, I don't even know, bundler, Tesla, some sort of thing. If it is going to offer something, eventually if people start talking about it, it gets a lot of buzz and people are talking about how it solves a lot of problems or it's a solution, then I'll look into it. Until that point, really, it's just a thing I keep passively hearing about from time to time. So I don't really ever feel under pressure or panicked to keep kind of absorbing and learning everything new. Kind of just delve into these things as and when they suit my interests. Yeah, I hate getting fed articles about new JS frameworks, but this article and a bunch of comments seem very gatekeeper-like. Yeah, you can get away with pure HTML and CSS a lot of the time, but my recent clients have asked for stuff that need to have JS frameworks. Being able to animate in After Effects and have it play back on a browser. You can be fed up with it, but if the client has explicit boards mocked up with crazy animations you have to deliver most of the time, vanilla HTML and CSS will not get me there. Here's the thing too, is you can hate these things or love them. If something is a standard way of doing it, then that's the thing. At the moment, there seems to be React and Vue and Angular, I suppose Svelte are kind of becoming the frameworks. And frameworks the last 5 years or so have just become a de facto way of doing things. You don't have to have used all of them. You don't have to have built something in production with all of them. You might have generally spent your time in one, and then you might have delved into one or two others just to get an understanding of if there's any differences or if there's any benefits you see in a particular way of working. Generally, people pick one early on, they get into that one, and then they just say all the others are rubbish compared to the one that I've picked, and so on. It all becomes quite, tribal. Once you understand something, so once you understand what a framework is or what its benefits are, much like a linter or a test framework or any of these things, you can generally stick with the one that serves you well and benefits you. And in time, if you get the chance to work on a different one or try something out for a different project, you can get aware of some slight varieties and maybe start to find preferences. But again, there's the notion that you have to, every time you hear about a new one, down tools and quickly start converting is a pressure you're just putting on yourself, I think. I've been working in software development for 15 years and I'm mostly dissatisfied with the current state of front end. I've always thought they were easy and anyone can learn it. Simplicity is what allows designers to produce some really incredible work. It's so complex and sophisticated that the people who tend to own the front end are software engineers who are stronger JavaScript developers. I think it's true that it's overwhelming when you're starting out because of you'd be confused about. So I write this and I pull information from the server and accept the bits that I build on the front end in JavaScript, which compile, except sometimes that can be run on a server and pre-compiled and sent, and it would be very hard to understand things, and it'd be very hard to just say, for now, just learning HTML and basic JavaScript and slowly step into those things in time. Well, your learning journey would need to be somewhat structured so that you can find the right tools at the right time and start to over time become aware of these things. But I imagine it would be quite a headache. It's worth pointing out as well, Lee Veroux on CSS Tricks had an article, How the Web is Really Built, which he did a massive survey in 2020 of most of the web to find out trends or actual tech usage, and found out CSS in JS 2% of websites, React about 4, service workers less than 1, Houdini practically 0. Whereas jQuery is on 83% of websites. Static site generators less than 1. WordPress powers 1/3 of the web. These are technologies, jQuery and WordPress, you could have been doing those sites 10 years ago. And you would still be employable, you would still be able to make careers doing freelance websites, doing projects. These things aren't broken, these things aren't damaged. And you could probably, for a fairly straightforward website, use jQuery or not, and some simple native language stuff, and make a much faster, more performant site than doing a big Gatsby pre-render or doing some big React app. That goes back to the idea of you don't have to use something because it's trendy. And if you feel you're constantly pressured to learn these new things, you should really just think about your relationship to that industry. Who's telling you that you have to learn these new things, and do you actually see a benefit? Perhaps being able to step back and not be the trend hunter means that you won't feel a burnout sense of constantly being rushed and pressured to learn things. And you can, in your own time, peruse these things, evaluate their benefits, and when you're convinced there is an actual net gain, then you can adopt those in time. Check out Livewire. Hotwire is, what I'm understanding, this is a radical new idea where instead of building loads of JavaScript on the client side, as you render some HTML on the server side and send it over, like, websites from 20 years ago. So that's the other thing, is these things seem to go quite circular, in which everyone goes wholesale one side, and then over time someone comes back the other way thinking it's an innovative idea. Again, it's the trends in itself, or this industry having a constant new hotness is its problem. But there's not many industries these days where you can just learn for a couple of years and you're set for life. I think technology just is fast moving, and all people are trying to do is make things better. So it's sadly going to have to be one of those things, I suspect, going forward. Really like to get into this, though. I think if people really disagree that this is really actually becoming a problem, or that there's some change needed here, then I'd be interested in that. So yeah, let me know. But that's all we got for now.